The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Samuel Hartwell adjusted his spectacles and unlocked the heavy oak door of Redemption Bank. 10 years had passed since he'd hung up his gun belt and traded his badge for a banker's ledger. But the weight of his Colt .45 still felt phantom heavy on his hip every dawn. The brass nameplate on his desk read Samuel Hartwell, bank president. But the folks in Redemption knew him simply as the quiet man who'd arrived one dusty evening in 1873 with nothing but a worn leather satchel and enough gold to start the town's first real bank. They didn't ask questions about his past, and he didn't volunteer answers. Samuel's fingers moved with practiced precision as he counted the morning deposits. The rhythm of numbers had become his meditation, a stark contrast to the chaos of his former life. Outside, the town was stirring to life. Mrs. Henderson sweeping her porch, young Billy Murphy racing his dog down the street, and the steady clang of Blacksmith Joe's hammer already ringing from the forge. "Morning, Mr. Hartwell," called Martha Stevens as she pushed through the door, her worn shawl clutched tight against the desert chill. "Need to make a deposit from the dry goods store." Samuel nodded with the gentle smile that had become his trademark. "Of course, Martha. How's business?" "Can't complain. The railroad's bringing more folks through town every week." She counted out silver dollars with calloused hands. "My Henry says we might need to expand the store soon." As Martha left, Samuel allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Redemption had grown from a struggling settlement to a thriving town during his tenure. The bank had funded new businesses, helped families buy homes, and provided the stability that transformed desperate people into hopeful citizens. It was honest work, clean work, the kind that let a man sleep peacefully at night. The bell above the door chimed again, and Samuel looked up to see a stranger silhouetted against the morning light. The man was tall, lean, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of hard years under an unforgiving sun. His duster coat was travel-stained, and his boots carried the dust of many miles. "Help you, friend?" Samuel kept his voice steady, though something in the stranger's pale blue eyes made his pulse quicken. "Name's Cole Bishop." The man's voice was gravelly, like stones grinding in a creek bed. "I'm looking for information about this bank's founding capital." Samuel's pen stilled in his hand. "Not sure what you mean. The bank was established with legitimate funds, all properly documented with the territorial government." Bishop stepped closer, his spurs jangling softly on the wooden floor. "See, that's interesting, because I've been tracking some missing gold for the better part of a decade. Gold that belonged to me and my associates." The morning air suddenly felt thick as molasses. Samuel set down his pen with deliberate care, his banker's mask slipping just enough to reveal the steel beneath. Gold gets moved around a lot in these parts. Mining, trading, banking, it's the lifeblood of commerce. This particular gold was taken from us during a disagreement near Silver Creek Canyon, about 10 years ago. Bishop's hand rested casually on his gun belt. Funny thing is, the man who took it just up and vanished, like smoke in the wind. Samuel stood slowly, his chair creaking in the sudden silence. Through the window, he could see Martha Stevens walking home, her deposit safe in his vault. He thought of the schoolhouse he'd helped fund, the church bell that rang every Sunday, the families who'd built their dreams on the foundation of his bank. "A lot of men disappeared in those days," Samuel said carefully. "The frontier was a dangerous place." Bishop smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Still is, depending on who you cross." He pulled out a faded wanted poster, unfolding it with deliberate slowness. "Ever seen this man?" Samuel looked down at his own face, 10 years younger and considerably more dangerous. The poster was weathered but clear. Wanted, Samuel Hartwell, bank robbery, murder, $5,000 reward. "That's quite a reward," Samuel said, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his veins. "Worth even more now, with interest." Bishop refolded the poster with care. "See, my associates and we've been very patient. But patience has its limits. What do you want?" "What's ours? Every last ounce of gold you stole from us, plus 10 years of what you might call compensation for our trouble." Bishop's eyes glittered like chips of winter sky. "By my calculations, that comes to about everything you've got." Samuel glanced at the vault door, solid steel behind ornate metalwork. Inside were the life savings of half the town, the funds that kept redemption alive and growing. "And if I refuse? Then my 6 companions and I will have to collect our debt in other ways." Bishop tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "This is a nice town, Mr. Hartwell. Be a shame if something happened to it." The threat hung in the air like gunpowder smoke. Samuel thought of Martha Stevens, of young Billy Murphy, of all the innocent people who'd trusted him with their futures. 10 years of peace, 10 years of building something good and clean, and now his past had come calling like a debt collector with a loaded gun. "I'll need time to consider your proposal." "Of course, a businessman always weighs his options." Bishop headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Hartwell, don't even think about running. We've got men watching every road out of town. Besides, you've got too much invested here to just walk away." As the door closed behind Bishop, Samuel sank back into his chair. His hands, steady as granite when counting money, trembled slightly as he reached for the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside, wrapped in oiled leather, lay the Colt .45 he'd sworn never to touch again. Outside, the town of Redemption continued its peaceful morning routine, unaware that 7 ghosts from the past had come to collect a debt that could destroy everything Samuel had built. The banker who'd found peace was about to remember why he'd been so dangerous as an outlaw. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward noon, each second bringing him closer to a reckoning 10 years in the making. Samuel spent the rest of the morning in a haze of mundane banking tasks, each transaction a reminder of what he stood to lose. Every customer who walked through his door represented a life that would be shattered if Bishop and his men decided to collect their debt with violence. The weight of his hidden past pressed down on him like a millstone. By noon, the bank was quiet except for the steady tick of the wall clock. Samuel unlocked the front door and flipped the sign to "closed for lunch," though food was the last thing on his mind. He needed to think, to plan, to remember skills he'd buried as deep as his gun. The truth was more complicated than Bishop knew. Yes, Samuel had stolen their gold, but it hadn't been a simple robbery. 10 years ago, Bishop's gang had terrorized 3 counties, leaving a trail of dead lawmen and innocent civilians. Samuel had been tracking them as a bounty hunter when he'd discovered their hidden cache of stolen gold near Silver Creek Canyon. The gold Bishop claimed as his own had been robbed from banks and trains across the territory. Samuel had taken it, but not for personal gain. He'd intended to return it to its rightful owners. Then Bishop's men had ambushed him, and in the gunfight that followed, Samuel had been forced to kill 2 of them. Wounded and outnumbered, he'd escaped with the gold, but not before Bishop had put a bullet in his shoulder that still ached in cold weather. Samuel had tried to return the gold, but the banks had been robbed so long ago that records were scattered or lost.
Some institutions had failed, others had been bought out. With no clear way to restore the money to its original owners, Samuel had made a fateful decision. He'd use the gold to build something good, something that would help people instead of hurting them. Redemption Bank had been born from that choice. Every dollar he'd loaned to struggling families, every business he'd helped establish, every dream he'd funded, it had all been built on gold stolen from thieves. It wasn't legal, but Samuel had told himself it was just. A sharp rap on the door interrupted his brooding. Through the glass he could see Sheriff Tom Bradley, a good man who'd never had to face anything more dangerous than Saturday night drunks and cattle rustlers. "Sam, you got a minute?" Tom's weathered face looked troubled as Samuel unlocked the door. "What's on your mind, Tom?" Strangers in town, 7 of them, all armed, all looking like they've been riding hard. Tom settled into the chair across from Samuel's desk.
"They're asking questions about you." Samuel's stomach tightened. What kind of questions? How long you been here, where you came from, how much money the bank handles. Tom's eyes were sharp despite his easygoing manner. The leader, tall fellow with pale eyes, he's got the look of a man who's killed before. "Did he give you any trouble?" "Not yet. But Sam, I've been sheriff for 15 years, and I know trouble when I see it." Tom leaned forward. "Is there something you need to tell me?" Samuel stared at his hands, seeing the calluses from years of honest work overlaying the older scars from a more violent life. Tom Bradley was a good man, but he was also outgunned and outclassed. If Samuel told him the truth, Tom would try to help and probably die for it. "Just some business rivals from back east," Samuel lied smoothly. "Nothing I can't handle." Tom didn't look convinced, but he nodded. "Well, you know where to find me if you need help." He stood to leave, then paused. "Sam, I've seen what you've done for this town. Whatever happened in your past, it doesn't change the man you've become." After Tom left, Samuel sat in the gathering shadows of his office, weighing his options. He could run, slip out of town after dark and disappear into the vast expanse of the frontier. But Bishop had been right about one thing. Samuel had too much invested here to just walk away. He could fight. 7 against 1 weren't impossible odds if he had the element of surprise. But innocent people would likely die in the crossfire, and that was a price he wasn't willing to pay. Or he could surrender the gold and hope Bishop would keep his word about leaving town peacefully. But men like Bishop didn't get where they were by keeping promises to their enemies. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Main Street, Samuel made his choice. He opened his desk drawer and lifted out the oiled leather bundle, unwrapping it with reverent care. The Colt .45 felt familiar in his hands, like greeting an old friend he'd hoped never to see again. The gun was clean and well-maintained despite years of neglect. Samuel had always been meticulous about his weapons, even when he'd sworn off using them. Old habits died hard, and in a life where split-second readiness could mean the difference between living and dying, some habits were worth keeping. He checked the cylinder, 6 rounds, each one a promise of violence he'd hoped never to make again. The weight of the gun brought back memories, the sound of gunfire echoing off canyon walls, the acrid smell of powder smoke, the terrible silence that followed a killing. Samuel had been good at violence once, too good. It was why he'd retired to become a banker, why he'd chosen the quiet life of numbers and ledgers over the chaos of gunfights and bounty hunting. But Bishop had made that choice for him, and now Samuel would have to remember why men had once crossed the street to avoid him. The sound of horses' hooves on the street outside drew his attention. Through the window he could see 7 riders making their way slowly down Main Street, their silhouettes dark against the dying light. They moved with the confidence of men who owned whatever ground they rode on. Bishop dismounted in front of the bank, his pale eyes finding Samuel through the window. The message was clear. Time was up. Samuel strapped on his gun belt for the first time in 10 years, the leather feeling strange against his hips. He'd grown soft in some ways, but the essential skills remained. His hand found the grip of his Colt with muscle memory older than his banking career. The door chimed as Bishop entered, followed by 2 of his men. The other 4 remained outside, positioned to watch the street and prevent any interference. "Mr. Hartwell," Bishop said with mock politeness, "I trust you've had time to consider our discussion." Samuel stood behind his desk, hands visible but ready. "I've considered it." "And?" "The gold you're looking for isn't here." Bishop's smile was sharp as a blade. "Now, that's disappointing, but not surprising. A man in your position would naturally try to protect his assets." "I'm not lying, Bishop. The gold was spent years ago, invested in this town, in these people. It's not sitting in a vault somewhere waiting for you to take it." "Then you'll have to find another way to pay your debt." Bishop's hand moved to his gun, "starting with everything in that vault." Samuel shook his head. "That money belongs to the people of this town. Farmers, shopkeepers, families, innocent people who trusted me with their life savings. Should have thought of that before you stole from us." "I stole from thieves. That gold was robbed from banks and trains, bought with the blood of innocent people. You never had any right to it." Bishop's eyes went cold. "Rights are what a man can take and hold, and I'm taking back what's mine." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Samuel could feel the familiar calm settling over him, the deadly focus that had made him one of the most feared men in the territory. 10 years of peace were about to end in gunfire and death. "Last chance, Hartwell. Open the vault, or we'll burn this whole town down looking for our gold." Samuel's hand moved to his gun. "Then I guess you'll have to burn it." The banker was gone, replaced by the gunfighter he'd tried so hard to leave behind. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Samuel's fingers hovered over his gun. 10 years of peaceful living, warring with instincts honed by survival. Bishop's men shifted restlessly, hands moving toward their weapons. "You're making a mistake, Hartwell," Bishop said, his voice deadly quiet. "There are 7 of us and 1 of you. Even if you're as fast as they say you were, you can't take us all." "Maybe not," Samuel replied, his voice steady as stone. "But I can take you, and that's all that matters." Bishop's laugh was harsh as desert wind.
"Still got that old arrogance, don't you? 10 years of playing banker hasn't changed you as much as you think." Through the window, Samuel could see the people of Redemption going about their evening routines. Martha Stevens was lighting the lamp in her store window. Young Billy Murphy was chasing fireflies in the growing dusk. Sheriff Tom Bradley was making his rounds, unaware that death was about to visit his peaceful town. "You want to know the truth about that gold?" Samuel asked, his eyes never leaving Bishop's. "I spent 3 years trying to return it to its rightful owners. Banks that had been robbed, families that had been ruined by your gang's crimes. But most of them were dead or gone, scattered to the winds." Touching story. "So I made a choice. I used that blood money to build something good, something clean. This town, this bank, it's given hundreds of people a chance at a better life. That gold has been paying for school books and medicine, helping families buy homes and start businesses. It's done more good in 10 years than it ever would have sitting in your strongbox. Bishop's patience was wearing thin. Enough talk. You've got 30 seconds to open that vault, or we start shooting. Samuel's hand closed around the grip of his Colt. The weight felt familiar, comforting in a way that terrified him. Then let's get this over with. The first shot came from one of Bishop's men, a nervous gunfighter who couldn't wait for the signal. Samuel moved with fluid precision, his draw smooth as silk after years of practice. The Colt bucked in his hand, and the nervous gunfighter crumpled to the floor. Chaos erupted in the small space. Bishop and his remaining companion dove for cover behind the wooden counter, while Samuel rolled behind his desk. Bullets splintered wood and shattered glass as the confined space filled with gun smoke and the deafening roar of gunfire. Samuel's second shot took Bishop's companion in the chest, but the man's return fire scored a burning line across Samuel's ribs. The banker-turned-gunfighter ignored the pain. His focus narrowed to the deadly mathematics of survival. "You're trapped, Hartwell," Bishop shouted from behind the counter. "My men outside will burn this place down with you in it." Samuel smiled grimly. Bishop had made a crucial error. He'd assumed his men were still in position. But Samuel had been watching the street, and he'd seen Sheriff Tom Bradley and his 3 deputies moving with surprising stealth. The lawmen of redemption might not be professional gunfighters, but they were brave men defending their home. The sound of gunfire from outside confirmed Samuel's observation. Bishop's remaining men were engaged in a running battle with the local law, their attention divided between the bank and the unexpected resistance from the town. "Sounds like your boys are having some trouble," Samuel called out, reloading his Colt with practiced speed. Bishop's curse was inventive and profane. "This isn't over, Hartwell. Even if you kill me, others will come. There's always someone willing to collect a bounty." "Maybe, but it won't be you." Samuel moved with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent years perfecting the art of violence. He circled around the counter, his boots silent on the blood-slicked floor. Bishop was reloading, his back turned as he fumbled with cartridges. "It's over, Bishop." The outlaw leader spun around, his gun half-loaded. For a moment, their eyes met across the smoky interior of the bank. Bishop's pale blue eyes held no fear, only the cold calculation of a man who'd lived by the gun for too long. "You think killing me makes you the hero of this story?" Bishop asked, his voice bitter. "You're still a thief, Hartwell, still a killer. 10 years of playing banker doesn't wash the blood off your hands." "No," Samuel agreed quietly, "it doesn't, but it means something. This town, these people, they mean something." Bishop's hand moved toward his gun. Samuel's Colt spoke first, the shot echoing through the bank like thunder. Bishop stumbled backward, his weapon clattering to the floor, unfired. "Should have taken the money and run," Bishop gasped, pressing his hand to the spreading red stain on his shirt. "Should have stayed disappeared." "Probably," Samuel agreed, "but running doesn't solve anything. It just postpones the reckoning." Bishop's legs gave out, and he slumped against the counter. His breathing was shallow, labored. "The gold, it's still blood money, still stolen." "Yeah," Samuel said, holstering his gun, "but it's doing good now. That has to count for something." Bishop's eyes went glassy, and his hand fell away from his wound. The last of the 7 outlaws was dead, and with him died the secret of Samuel Hartwell's past, at least for now.
The front door burst open, and Sheriff Tom Bradley rushed in with his gun drawn. He stopped short at the sight of the carnage, his eyes taking in the 3 bodies and the smoking ruins of the bank's interior. Jesus, Sam, what happened here? Old debts come and due, Samuel said wearily. He was suddenly aware of the blood seeping through his shirt, the ache in his ribs where Bishop's man had winged him. Is everyone else all right? Few bullet holes in some buildings, but no one else got hurt. We got the other 4. They weren't expecting resistance from the town. Tom holstered his gun and looked around the destroyed bank. This about your past? Samuel nodded. Part of it. There might be others who come looking eventually. Well, they'll find the same thing these boys did. Tom's voice was firm. A town full of people who won't let anyone hurt what we've built here. As the sun set over redemption, Samuel stood in the ruins of his bank and considered the cost of his choices. 3 men were dead. His carefully constructed new life was shattered, and the secret he'd guarded for 10 years was now known to the people he'd hoped to protect. But the town still stood. The people were safe, and sometimes that was enough.
The banker who'd found peace in numbers and ledgers was gone, replaced by a man who understood that some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant becoming a killer again. Samuel Hartwell had learned that you couldn't outrun your past forever, but you could choose what to do when it finally caught up with you. In the distance, the church bell tolled the hour, its bronze voice carrying across the desert wind. Tomorrow, he would start rebuilding the bank, his reputation, perhaps even his peace of mind. But tonight, he was simply a man who'd stood his ground when it mattered most. The 7 outlaws had come to collect their stolen gold, but they'd found something more valuable. A town full of people willing to fight for what they believed in, led by a man who'd learned that redemption wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to build something better from its ashes.